Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, going inside the matchup with a big game breakdown for big time. It is number 1 Ohio State going across the country to go play Washington out in Seattle, Husky Stadium, sailgating and all. And for this matchup, man, we've got a very fascinating head-to-head of two new starting quarterbacks. Of course, Julian Sayin taking over for Ohio State, and DeMond Williams, though he got a good bit of run in a bowl game for Washington last year, this has been his first season as the full-fledged, undoubted QB1. DK, our resident quarterback here on the Cover 3 podcast. We're not going to do tail of the tape. We did that earlier, but I do want to get your analysis, how you've graded each of these quarterbacks. You know, Julian Sayin did enough against a very good Texas defense early. Then things have been a little bit lighter going through Grambling and Ohio. DeMond Williams, of course, with 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, 2 of those coming on the ground, also has the Huskies off to a 3-0 start. Danny, what do you make of what you've seen from both these quarterbacks so far this year?
When I see that graphic, DeMond Williams holding the football, I just remember how small he is because that ball looks huge in his hands. And he was not as big as we thought he was going to potentially be. That point aside, I think they've both been really, really good. I think everybody kind of knows about Julian Sayin because of the hype that was surrounding him coming in. And he's done a great job operating the system. He looks very comfortable within it. But his first road start, this will be a great opportunity for him to take that next step forward. Like, he's passed all the tests that he's had so far. This is sort of the next evolution of being the quarterback at Ohio State. Now you have to take it on the road. The other quarterback in DeMond Williams, I think, is one of the better kept secrets in college football. He's been incredibly dynamic. I was actually talking to Jed Fish before the game when we were out at Nebraska, and he came on our pregame show, and he tended to agree. He's like, we have a special quarterback. And that is one aspect to DeMond Williams' game that can wreak havoc on any defense, no matter how good you are, is the ability to run the football and get it done with your legs. And he's been very protective of it, has not turned the ball over, been close to perfect. So I think this is a really, really fun matchup and a really good test for Ohio State in one of the better atmospheres in college football. That's sort of one of the better kept secrets, their quarterback and the environment out there in Seattle.
Yeah, Dan, I'm really excited about the battle of play callers here. Ryan Day obviously designing that offense, and Brian calling it. But like Jed Fish, I think he's such a great designer of offense. He finds ways to feed their studs and make things pretty easy, for DeMond Williams. The issue is, gosh, the Ohio State defensive backfield is so veteran and so good, and all the backers can run and cover, and they can show you such a great variety of looks, and they're clearly going to try to scheme to take away Boston, the stud receiver, for the Huskies. I'm curious to see what the other options look like for Washington and how much they can get DeMond Williams' legs involved as well.
Yeah, I think we showed the stats earlier, the breakdown between Williams and Sayin, and I think it needs to be mentioned that a lot of the damage that Julian Sayin did came against Grambling in Ohio. Like, he made up a lot of numbers after a pretty pedestrian performance against Texas in his first start, which, not knocking him for, that's one of the best defenses in the country you're going up against in your first career start. So it's not like I expected him to come out and play fantastic, but I do think that this is another big test, and after what we saw from him against Texas, this isn't something that we should just look at his numbers and say, oh, he's been great, he's going to come, he's going to tear this Washington defense apart. Because as Danny talked about, Husky Stadium is a very difficult stadium to play in for opposing teams. Washington, in the playoff era, if you take out the 2020 COVID season when there weren't any fans in the stands, they're 55-15 at home. That win percentage ranks 18th nationally. And you have to think, if you're Julian Sayin, you've never played in an environment like this where while you're at the line of scrimmage trying to get the calls in, trying to do everything, the crowd is screaming, the stadium is shaking, you can barely hear your own thoughts. So what kind of procedural mistakes might we see them make at the line of scrimmage before the snap that could lead to problems, that could lead to turnovers, that could lead to short fields for Washington to help them keep them in the game? But on the other side of this, if you look at Ryan Day, since he's come at Ohio State, this is an insane statistic. In true road games, Ohio State is 21-3 under Ryan Day. They have lost fewer games on the road under Day than they have at home. This has been a team that's gone on the road and performed very well. And to Bud's point, you look at their defense, they're going to be able to keep the Buckeyes in the game no matter what happens with this offense. The question will be, can Ohio State avoid the mistakes? Can they finally start leaning more on their run game than we've seen them do to this point to help move the ball, which they weren't really able to do against Texas to help out Julian Sand and not put too much on his shoulders? I think that's going to be a huge matchup in this game.
Another matchup that I've definitely got my eye on. I have a great memory, many great memories from our time at Big Ten Media Days. But Tom, when you looked lovingly into Jedd Fisch's eye and you saw him in man-to-man, you said, you have a type. You have a type, and it's a 6'4" cornerback that's about 200 pounds. And Tacario Davis is that type. So Tacario Davis at one cornerback position, Prysock at the other one, another 6'4", 200 some odd pound player. You know, those types of bodies are what you are going to need to try and contain Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and the rest of these Ohio State wide receivers. Bud just gave a great example of Ohio State, how they're trying to defend Denzel Boston, who is among the best wide receivers in the country. But what about the alpha? How does Washington contain Jeremiah Smith? Tom, how do you think it happens?
I think you're probably going to shade coverage to him like a second guy, whether it's over the top or just underneath, and you're going to try to force them to go other directions. You're going to want to make Julian Sand get through progressions. You're just going to want to take away the first read, and Jeremiah Smith's going to be the first read many times. But if you're Ohio State, perhaps you counter that, and you don't make maybe Jeremiah Smith. We've seen them do this before, Ohio State, Marvin Harrison. There were quite a few games where Marvin Harrison was just a decoy. He was attracting attention, and Ohio State went to other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar here, because you can maybe slow down Jeremiah Smith. You really can't take him out of the game unless Ohio State chooses to.
That's what's so good about having a guy like Carnell Tate that you have as an option if they are shading coverage. Last year was Emeka Buka, who obviously parlayed that into a first-round draft pick. I mean, it's pretty nice to have a plethora of weapons, but I do think this is one where, you know, if you call him a decoy, then you're not even thinking about him. But I do think when you give a young quarterback like Julian Sand, you're going to call your plays accordingly, and that's where it becomes a priority for Julian Sand to recognize, are they shading coverage, or is there an opportunity still to go to Jeremiah Smith, or do I want to get through my progressions, get off of him, get to some of the other routes? So something to keep an eye on. Having bigger corners does absolutely help. Jeremiah Smith is an absolute beast. I don't think you're going to stop him altogether. You just have to make sure you're not trying to force the ball to him, which can be a tendency for a younger quarterback, especially first big start on the road.
And to your point about rolling coverage, like is Tacario Davis going to play for Washington? Because, you know, he missed last week. We already know one of their stud linebackers is out for this game. They've been hoping to get Javon Parker, their best defensive lineman, back for a while now. But again, he did not play last week. Washington is not a team that has a depth of studs on defense. You really need your studs to play. So you're already down the backer. We don't know yet about, you know, arguably their best corner, although Ephesians Prysock has been, you know, really a revelation for them. I think the problem is Ohio State has so many weapons that if you do overcommit to taking away Jeremiah Smith, that's just going to be easy throws for Julian Sand. Washington, though, is one of the very best in the nation so far at pressure rate without blitzing. So that defensive line has gotten pressure, but again, we do have to ask, like, who have they actually played? Ohio State, we have already seen them do an okay job blocking an elite Texas front.
Yep, we will keep an eye on Davis's status, listed as the starter on the game week depth chart by Washington. But of course, we'll get injury reports, official and unofficial as well. Keep it locked into 24/7 Sports for all the latest on that. Okay, Bud, let's just make this simple. It is Husky Stadium, and we've talked about that environment. This is the number one team in the country. This is they got tested, certainly, but on their own home field against Texas. On a scale of 1 to 10, Bud, how much of an upset alert is the Ohio State Buckeyes under right now?
I'd say like a 2 or 3. I expect.
Low.
I guys, like if Washington was full strength, then I would believe it more. But I don't think they have a depth of special players in this team. I think they need their studs to be studs. I think they need their studs to be on the field. I don't think Ohio State has much to worry about here.
I would put it at a 3.5. And I don't know if I would go much higher than that. I think if you're Washington, you're going to want to establish your ground game, which you've been outstanding at. Don't get me wrong, to start the season. Jonah Coleman, Adam Muhammad, Damon Williams, they've combined for 712 yards on the ground, 6.4 per attempt with 13 touchdowns. But this Ohio State run defense is a monster. So that Washington offensive line with Carver Willis and Drew as a party at tackle, the Hatchet brothers on the inside, they're going to have to win a lot of battles consistently to kind of move those dudes out of the way. And that's been very hard because Caden McDonald and Will Smith on the Ohio State defensive line have been outstanding to start the season. So it's an uphill battle for them. I think that you need to hope that your crowd helps turn the ball over with Julian Sayin and confuses him, causes some problems, and that you're able to just move the ball on the ground.
I'll go 4.5. I think the point spread is pretty interesting. The fact that it's not over double digits, the odds makers maybe think this is a little bit closer. I have my concerns about Washington's defense, slowing down Jeremiah Smith and this Ohio State attack. They haven't exactly been airtight against lesser competition so far this year. So, do you picture a shootout of Damon Williams and company going back and forth with Ohio State? Probably not, but I think parity is here. I think this is still one of the best rosters in college football. I don't think it would be crazy to see an upset, but I'll put it at 4.5. Still pretty low.
Crank that baby. No, this is a 6. This is a watch out. This is going to have the entire nation wait a second, why is that only a 7-point game right now? That's what I think that the 8.5 is perfect because Ohio State will have this way too close late. And then we get to find out whether Julian Sayin can grow up on the fly in the fires of Husky Stadium. I do think Ohio State ends up winning, but I'm going to crank this up to a 6. If Ohio State takes anything lightly about this matchup, they could go and get got by Husky Stadium. So I'll give it just a little bit higher, but ultimately, let it be read into the record, I do think the Buckeyes come out of week 5 with a 0 in the loss column.